What's going on, everybody? In today's video, I want to go through a handful of players who I think are really going to have an amazing 2022 season. Now, these are not necessarily players that just transferred into the league during this offseason. They're more players who came into the league partway through or halfway through last season, but did not have cards available to be used in the MLS. So when the new cards drop, when the new season starts in about a month or two time, these guys should be available for purchase. These are guys that I'm looking forward to trying to buy, trying to own, and using within my own Sorare gallery. So these aren't necessarily new transfers in 2022, but these are guys who don't have cards yet that will drop pretty shortly when the new season starts. So without further ado, let's jump into one of my top players who I'm really excited to use and own in this upcoming MLS season. Now, if you've been paying any attention to the MLS at all, especially during the last half of the 2021 season, there's a guy named Ryan Gauld who is really tearing it up for the Whitecaps over in the Western Conference. Now, when he came over, he pretty much lit the Vancouver offense on fire. I would actually go as far as to say he was the main driving force behind Vancouver's success during the second half of last season. And if you look at his stats here on FBref, which if you have watched any of my previous videos, you know I love because of all the stats and comparisons it provides you and lets you do, that you can actually see why he's so important, and especially why he's such a good Sorare scorer in 2022. Now, when you look at the things that he did really, really well, the first thing that stands out a lot, which is especially important for things like decisives and all-around score, is the number of shot-creating actions that he creates or takes every single game, right? You can see here it says per 90 minutes, so basically per game. A little over 5 shot-creating actions per game, right? So there's things that lead to a shot, things that lead to a scoring chance. And you can see he's within the 94th percentile in the league. That is an insanely high work rate, an insanely high rate of participation within the offense. And so essentially, if you're playing on the Vancouver team and your team scores a goal or your team has a scoring chance, it's very likely that Ryan Gauld is part of that reason why they almost scored or why they did score. And see, because of that, his expected goals, his expected assists is also one of the highest percentiles in the league too, because of how active he is and how important he is to that Vancouver offense. The second guy I'm super excited about is Franco Fragipan. Now, I'm not entirely sure I'm saying his name right. You can definitely correct me in the comments. But he is an attacking winger, I believe an attacking midfielder from Minnesota United for the Loons. Now, when you look at his stats here, you can see the first thing that jumps off the board to you is how important he is to the forwards playing there. Now, I'm not entirely sure who will be taking the place of Reynoso if he is suspended. If you don't know, Reynoso is in a bit of legal trouble potentially, and so he may or may not be in the lineup in the foreseeable future. So with him out potentially, these number of assists might drop. His offensive stats might drop because that key centerpiece might be gone. But in his own right, he is an amazing scorer in terms of just his pure stats. Right, you can see here, high rate of assists, higher number of expected goals and assists. He is in the top 20 percentile of passes attempted, top 20 percentile of passes received that are considered progressive. Now, when you look at this stat, what's important about it is it pretty much only focuses on stats or passes, I should say, that go really far up the field, right? Passes that get into the enemy's penalty area, get near their box or penalty box. And so the fact that he's having such a high number of progressive passes, passes deep into the enemy's defense, shows you just how active he is and how much he is on the ball within the enemy's defensive zone of the field. So very active, very integral to Minnesota's offense. As I said, I'm probably going to hold off on him a little bit at the start of the season when his cards drop to see what happens with Emmanuel Reynoso. But if Reynoso stays around, then I'm sure he's going to have these same numbers or even better numbers in 2022. Another attacking midfielder that I'm interested in, who's not kind of the same caliber as the first two, but a guy who has a lot of potential and maybe even might be a little on the cheaper side if you're looking for a budget-friendly midfielder, is Daniel Goosdog of the Philadelphia Union. Now, this guy is important for a couple reasons. One, he is an offensive machine for the Philadelphia Union. You can see here, progressive passes received, right? If the ball is going up the field, the ball is getting into the penalty area, it is very likely that he's one of the reasons for that, one of the driving reasons for getting the ball into a scoring chance or creating a scoring opportunity. You can also see that he is pretty aggressive and pretty active when he's not on the ball, right? In terms of pressures, he's in the top 30th percentile of wingers and attacking midfielders. So he's just incredibly important to really driving the ball forward and getting that ball forward to the strikers that the Union brought in. Now, if you look at his stats on, I believe, Sorare data, let's actually go ahead and open it. Let's go to Goosdog here. You'll see that his scores aren't that amazing, right? His L15 is only 49. Had an amazing end to the season, but when you look at just his L15, which is pretty much how long he was in the MLS last season, you can see his scores weren't, amazing. They didn't really jump out at you. Now, the reason why I think this doesn't really matter is that the Philadelphia Union's strikers have pretty much completely changed over the offseason. Kasper Schmeichel is gone, went to the Fire. Sergio Santos probably won't be the other starting striker if Carranza can sort of situate himself towards the top of the depth chart there. So they might have a very different look offensively in the season. Now, Michael Ura, a guy who's coming over from Brøndby to replace Schmeichel, he looks pretty promising. He's a guy who gets a lot of shots on target. I believe over the past couple seasons over in the Danish league, he had over 44%-ish of his shots on target, which is a pretty good rate. It's kind of what you want to see from a starting striker. He seems like he's going to be more accurate than Schmeichel. Schmeichel really wasn't that good in terms of converting his scoring chances. And so if this new look offense for the Union can really click, I think a lot of these passes, especially in the penalty area, the penalty box, will probably be more converted into decisives. And so he'll probably have a much higher floor for one, and even a higher ceiling in terms of getting more decisives on the Sorare platform. Maybe one of the guys I'm most excited about out of all of these four is Cristian Arango. This is a guy who came in to LAFC to replace Diego Rossi, I believe, when he went to the Turkish league. And as you can see, he really blew the MLS out of the park, right? 17 matches played, 16 decisives, 14 of those being goals, pretty much scoring every single time he took the pitch. If you look at his stats, right, how he compared to other forwards in the league, not surprisingly, he's kind of near the top of the charts in terms of everything, right? In terms of shots total, in terms of expected goals, expected assists, right? So pretty much did a lot of the heavy lifting for LAFC. Now, what's also kind of interesting to note is look at the interceptions rate. This guy wasn't just an offensive machine. He was also really, really important for tracking back, getting the ball back, trying to continue the offense pushing forward, right? A lot of touches, a lot of interceptions. So a guy who has potential for a good AA score if he can get a little more involved in the defensive side of things. But overall, I mean, I expect this guy to be one of the most expensive forwards going into next season. If he can continue what he did last season, I don't see why he shouldn't be worth the price of, say, a Tati Castellanos or let's say a Raul Ruidiaz. Like, he definitely has a potential to be one of the top and most valuable forwards in the league in 2022. Now, you might be thinking, gosh, these guys look like they might be pretty expensive, right? Ryan Gauld likely will be expensive. Arango almost guaranteed to be expensive if he picks up his form right where he left off at the beginning of the season. What might be a budget option? Well, one guy who hasn't had cards drop yet, who should have cards in 2022, it might be more budget friendly, is Patrick Klimala, the forward for the New York Red Bulls, who came in about partway through last season, which is why he didn't get any cards. Now you can see in the stats here, right, 29 matches played, 14 decisives. That's like, pretty middling, pretty average. Not necessarily what you want to see from a guy that you're using every week in Champions America. However, his stats-wise is what makes me think he might have a lot of upside as a budget-friendly striker, budget-friendly forward. When you look at something called SCA and GCA, that stands for shot creating attempts or goal creating attempts, that shows you just how active he is in the offense, right? He's in the top 97th percentile, so really towards the top of all forwards in the MLS in terms of actions that lead to a shot or actions that lead to a goal, right? So he's really, really involved for the Red Bulls. Basically, what this means is if the Red Bulls can have a better offense, can have a little more firepower, a little more scoring in 2022, this will mean he's going to have a ton of decisives potentially in the following season, right? Because he's doing everything right. He's getting a lot of touches. He's getting a lot of shots. You can see top 93rd percentile for just total shots taken. Doing pretty much everything right, everything possible to get a high score on Sorare. It's just that the Red Bulls, the guys around him, just aren't that great at scoring, right? The Red Bulls were not a good scoring team. They were not a good offensive team. So if they can click more offensively this year, if they can sort of shift gears, score some more goals this year, then I really think that he'll have a much higher average score, much higher floor than usual because of these stats here, right? The things that he did that led to shots, led to goals, as long as he can just convert more goals, as long as he can get more production from people around him, I really think his scores in Sorare will improve.